This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Intimate partner violence. Police in Nova Scotia seek to strengthen their response following the deaths of 6 women.
Tracking the blackouts. CBC investigates a year of power failures in the province.
And uncertain future. Time is running out for Ukrainians living in Canada on temporary visas.
Lots of sunshine, but chilly temperatures on the way for Wednesday. Then tracking our next storm, which will bring snow, ice, and rain. Your full forecast is coming up.
The deaths of 6 women killed by their partners in recent months have shaken Nova Scotians. One RCMP officer even told CBC in nearly 20 years he's never seen this level of domestic violence in the province.
Both the RCMP and Halifax Regional Police are trying to get more resources to help deal with the rising intimate partner violence. Our Haley Ryan takes a look at how these cases are handled and how new initiatives might make a difference.
The Provincial, RCMP, and Halifax Regional Police are either getting or asking for more domestic violence resources. It's especially timely given the string of recent homicides where 6 women were killed by their partners in just a few months.
It doesn't stop. Every week I get 10 falls at least.
Constable Jules Larocque is the domestic violence officer for Halifax Regional Police. He reviews all of the reported cases to make sure frontline police have done the proper risk assessments and investigations.
The spike of it is that, I don't know, maybe times are tough, less money, things are expensive now. I don't know. It's almost a losing battle. You don't know how to really fix this.
About 1,600 cases were reported in Halifax last year. Nearly 180 were high risk. For decades, high-risk files have been flagged to various government departments and agencies. And now health professionals can report the highest risk cases to a new working group. The hope is to shed light on the 80% of cases never reported to police. Halifax police are asking for a new civilian domestic violence case coordinator this year. These staff do safety planning with victims and work with transition houses. Dolly Mosier says this would allow them to contact victims more quickly and do more education.
For me, that's the big message, is just call. We won't send the police after you. We'll just give you some information so that you can break free from the violence.
Nova Scotia RCMP case coordinators handle high-risk files from Mountie territory, as well as municipal forces besides Halifax and Cape Breton. That RCMP team will grow from 3 to 5 people this year, as those high-risk cases have risen steadily since 2019.
The civilians are actually connected, well engaged with our external stakeholders, the advocacy groups. That is, I believe, one of the best opportunities we might have going forward to address prevention measures, as opposed to being a more reactive policing model.
Morrow says he's never seen this level of domestic violence in his nearly 20 years in the province. And the RCMP are reviewing what else they need to do to help address the growing violence. Haley Ryan, CBC News, Halifax.
In a moment of all-party collaboration this afternoon, MLAs on the legislature's Health Committee agreed to prioritize the topic of gender-based violence. Michael Gorman reports.
Collaboration amongst all 3 parties at the legislature tends to be rare during majority government settings, but that's what happened today during the legislature Standing Committee on Health. The Liberal Party put forward as a future topic gender-based violence. As the third place party, their topic would be called third, meaning that it would be 3 months normally before that comes forward. But all 3 parties supported a motion from Liberal House Leader Ian Rankin to call the topic first, given its significance in the province. Here's what representatives from all 3 parties had to say.
It's an epidemic. We need a multidisciplinary approach. So the Health Committee was one avenue. It's also being put forward at Community Services. So I think we all need to come together and find ways to prevent this from happening, to support survivors, and to really take the partisan stuff out of this. It's too important.
There are issues that are so important, many of them. This is one of them where we must work together, and this is a good day for recognizing that.
We have a gender-based violence epidemic in this province. We have had it for a number of years, and we're not moving the needle. And the recent losses in this province demonstrate that. So I'm really pleased that we'll be sitting and considering that topic first. And we need a multidisciplinary approach. So health is certainly part of the puzzle.
One thing that did not happen at today's committee meeting was a change in the amount of time that each party has to ask witnesses questions. Last week, during 2 separate committees, the PCs used their majority to give themselves more time than the other 2 parties. Customarily, the time has been split evenly amongst them all. As the Health Committee goes, it's going to remain the same, with each party getting an equal amount of time to ask witnesses questions. Michael Gorman, CBC News, Halifax.
Quick look at the weather now with Ryan, and we're hanging on to the sun.
And the cold.
And the cold. That's going to be the theme for Wednesday. That'll be the calm before the storm. Yes, and indeed high pressure dominating across the province on Wednesday. Temperatures quite variable yet again, -2, -3 in the southwest. Most in the -5 to -8 range. Light winds, a pretty pleasant day overall, thanks to this area of high pressure, which again will be overhead, keeping things quiet. Our next storm rolls in Thursday morning. We'll get the commute in to work okay. Not so much in the afternoon. A messy mix. Snow changing to ice pellets, freezing rain, and then eventually over to rain Thursday evening. Gusty southeast winds as well, likely gusting 50, 60, even 70 kilometers per hour. Stronger winds for Cape Breton, and this will all blow through by the time we get to Friday morning. We're looking at about 1 to 5 centimeters of snow, so not a significant shot of snow, but a prolonged period of ice pellets and freezing rain. 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 hours of that icing before that change over to rain. Could see a bit more in the form of snow and ice pellet accumulation over northern Cape Breton, especially for Victoria County and into the Highlands. And again, a reminder, we're looking at both of these. Ice pellets, sprinkles, freezing rain, glaze. Both will be problematic and not so tasty as the donuts. So we're looking at both of those to be factors for the drive home on Thursday, Tom and Amy. And the freezing rain as well could create some issues for power outages as those winds are going to be gusty.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
I'm hungry for
Me
one.
too.
I'll say that. Okay.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, last year, there were unplanned power outages at nearly every single day in Nova Scotia. CBC News decided to track the data on a daily basis in 2024 to see just how often we lose power in this province. Andrew Lamb brings us that story.
We all know how frustrating it can be when your power goes out. So, a team of CBC reporters took a look at how frequently that happens here in Nova Scotia. What we found? Unplanned outages nearly every single day of 2024.
Typical standards aimed for reliability standards are like to be less than 2 outages per person per year. So I'd say it sounds like a tremendous number of outages.
CBC recorded over 4,700 outages from Nova Scotia Power's online outage map throughout 2024. Some of the top explanations for outages we saw included planned maintenance, weather events like high winds, and trees hitting power lines.
We know that we need to do more. Reliability has definitely been challenged by the increase of the severe and frequent storms.
Last year, Nova Scotia Power was fined for again failing to meet certain performance standards. The utility says it has a plan to improve. It's investing $1.3 billion over the next 5 years towards reliability upgrades.
We also need to modernize the power grid as well. So in addition to replacing the existing equipment that we have, we're also installing new equipment that can sectionalize our power lines and reduce the number of customers that are impacted.
The utility says trees hitting power lines is the #1 cause of outages during storms. That's why it's nearly doubled what it spends on trimming trees.
We need to continue to invest in the grid every single year, and that will be our focus even after the 5 years is done.
Muhlenbach says keeping electricity prices low is not the only thing people are interested in, especially as society moves towards electrification.
When we have more even home heating or electric vehicles, and having reliable power It's just going to become more and more important.
Nova Scotia Power estimates the improvements in its 5-year plan will reduce the average outage duration by about 20%. Andrew Lamb, CBC News, Halifax.
Nova Scotia's Auditor General is renewing her call for the provincial government to increase transparency and accountability for over-budget spending. Kim Adair released a report today on the province's finances. She's again highlighting the amount of money the government spends outside of its budget and is calling for change.
Over-budget spending has significantly increased in recent years, with a total of $7 billion approved in the last decade, and $1.4 billion in the last fiscal year alone.
Wants spending outside of the approved budget to come before the legislature for debate and approval, as happens in other provinces and with the federal government. Opposition leaders support the call and point out it's the third time she's made the recommendation.
We need to take this recommendation to amend the Finance Act really seriously. We need to make sure that Nova Scotians know where their money is being spent and if it's getting outcomes for them.
This is not really new. Over the last 3 years, they spent over $3.6 billion not approved by the legislature. So virtually every department has been overspending.
The PCs have rejected Adair's previous calls for change, and Finance Minister John Lohr gave no indication today of deviating from that position.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Donald Trump's planned tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum will hurt both countries.
We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs.
Trudeau also highlighted the harms from the levies when he met U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the Paris AI Summit. The Prime Minister says he'll work with other world leaders to coordinate a response. The UF tariffs are set to take effect early next month. Canada sends tons of steel and aluminum worth billions of dollars to the U.S. every year. Trudeau hasn't announced retaliatory measures, saying he hopes it doesn't come to that, but added that Canada's response will be firm and clear. There are calls tonight for Ottawa to make it easier for hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians living in Canada to extend their visas.
They arrived under a temporary program to help flee a war that's not over. But as Kayla Hounsell reports, that program is about to expire.
Housekeeping. Kate Mokrush is the manager of housekeeping at a Halifax hotel, but she used to be the general manager of a hotel in Ukraine. Huddled under stairways at home in Kyiv, her family made the difficult decision to leave. But before they had even arrived in Canada in 2022, they got tangled in a web of paperwork mistakes through no fault of their own.
Paperwork, it's every time stressful, especially in our situation.
Now they have to do more paperwork to extend their work visas because the program under which they came to Canada is set to expire March 31st.
They're working, they're integrating in our communities, we welcome them here. Why are we making them nervous and uncertain about their future here?
The Ukrainian-Canadian Congress is calling on the federal government to extend the whole program for Ukrainians for another 3 years. Nearly 300,000 Ukrainians came to Canada this way. The government says it has no intention of sending anyone back while the war continues, but it is refusing a blanket extension.
Paperwork is stressful. I understand that, but we also needed to understand how many people are living and working here. I think it's very little to ask in this context.
The program gave Ukrainians access to free language classes and work visas. To extend them usually requires a valid passport, which some are struggling to renew. The government is promising flexibility.
It's a very uncertain situation.
Mokrush says she'll apply for the extension next month. She gains strength from the chaos that comes with raising kids, watching them learn English and French, and develop a passion for Canada's national sport. They say their ultimate goal is to become permanent residents as they put together a new life, one piece at a time. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Oh, isn't that pretty?
That is pretty, isn't it?
Our
That's
cameras made us
Discover
stop
Wolfville.
in Wolfville, yeah. Ryan will be back next with the full weather forecast. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Well, I guess it depends how you look at it, but the good news is that we're hanging onto the sun.
Mm-hmm. And soak it up while you can, right? It's not a lot of warmth from it, but it's still cheery.
That's right. That's right. To brighten our spirits before the absolute mess that will be Thursday. And yeah, that's, again, Thursday's not going to be a heavy shoveling event by any stretch, but just going to be really messy. Snowfall amounts for most of the province, as you saw earlier, will be less than 5 centimeters. If you missed it, we'll show the map again. Let's start with our current temperatures. And you can see it up around the freezing mark in through the southwest of the province, the Tri-County area, and as expected, much cooler in the northeast. Temps at minus 15 at that Collegeville station in Antigonish County. Again, that's an inland station that will be very cold tonight, no question. With our overnight lows, we'll be showing you those in just a moment. There is the increasing clouds and a couple of flurries starting to push their way in here out of New Brunswick, and they'll move into Nova Scotia as we roll through the next couple of hours. In fact, starting to see those picking up in through Cobequid Bay, down towards Economy, and starting to push into Truro here over the next little bit. So heads up on that. But the bulk of the activity here off to the west could see locally maybe 1 to 2 centimeters from this trough moving through tonight. This system here will actually drive to our south thanks to this area of high pressure. And there's the Colorado low, which will move in for Thursday. Temperatures very chilly here across all of Canada. Vancouver, one of our hot spots at 1 on the plus side. And you can see even St. John's at -10 there. So for tonight, temperatures are going to be, again, very chilly. We'll be, for the most part, back in the -10 to -15 range across the province for tonight. Low-lying areas may dip below -15. Colchester, Cumberland back into those eastern parts of the mainland, including places like that Collegeville station. Will be into that -10 to -12 range across Cape Breton for tonight as well. Closer to -6 in through the Yarmouth and Tri-County area along parts of the coast, but inland likely into the minus double digits there as well. For Wednesday morning, those northwest winds will be, again, adding a little bit of a bite to the air, but it won't be a breezy day by any stretch for Wednesday, with fairly light northerly winds and that area of high pressure keeping the sun nice and bright. -2 to -3 for the south and west, and -5 to -8 for the rest of the province with those relatively light winds. Okay, so let's walk you through Thursday. And these are your temperatures by about 5 o'clock. And this is where we'll see temperatures will have already bumped up to 5-6 degrees, 3-4-5 degrees in through the Halifax back towards the valley. And we'll be getting there, temperatures slowly rising into Thursday evening for the north and east. So we'll see as we run through the timeline here, by the time we get to, say, 8 a.m., starting to see maybe a few flakes pushing into the Tri-County area, most of us getting to work okay on Thursday, and then that snow spreading into the western parts of the province by noon, into the metro area around that time, and then that snow will spread eastward throughout the afternoon. This messy mix from snow to ice pellets to freezing rain, this is what could last 3 to as much as 4, 5, maybe 6 hours of the icing as it slowly crosses the province. Looks like it'll probably be closer to 3-4 hours, but again, we'll take a closer look at this tomorrow. The winds from the southeast will gust generally 50, 60, and 70 kilometers per hour, but I do think we could see some gusts to 80 along parts of the coast, especially the Northumberland shore and down here in the Tri-County area. Note by 8 o'clock that change over to rain for most of the province, and then that transition will happen even into Cape Breton by the time we get into the Thursday evening and midnight, turning the clock over to Friday. And so by the time we're said and done, 1 to 5 centimeters of snow, as we said, so not a lot of snow, but then we got the ice pellets and that freezing rain mixing in as well, so just a real mess. And then we'll change over to a bit of rain. Heavier snow back through Cape Breton, could see totals exceeding 5, 10, maybe 15 centimeters, especially for the Highlands and into Victoria County. We're quiet for Friday and Saturday. We're going to do it all over again on Sunday, Tom and Amy, with more snow, ice, and rain fun.
We'll be well practiced.
Yeah, we're used to it.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Coming up, we learn more about a new home share program that's helping move people with disabilities out of institutions. A Nova Scotia human rights ruling a few years back says anyone currently living in an institution must be living in community by 2028. As part of the so-called remedy, people with disabilities in Nova Scotia are going to have a new option for choosing where they want to live. It's called home sharing. Laura Church is the executive director of the Nova Scotia Residential Agencies Association, which received funding from the provincial government as part of the remedy to come up with support for home sharing program. First of all, Ms. Church, if you don't mind, how does home sharing work?
So home sharing refers to a situation where a person with a disability either comes to live in your home or a suite in your home, or perhaps they own or rent their own space and a caregiver goes to live in with them. So that is what home sharing is in this context.
We don't know or have seen a lot of it in Nova Scotia, but it does exist in other places. I'm wondering what some of the lessons learned from places like British Columbia where this has been done.
Yeah, so in British Columbia, home share is by far the model of support that most people choose for their supported living arrangement. And so, there's a lot of lessons we've learned, not just from British Columbia, but several other provinces and states and countries who do home sharing. Things like it's really important that people have full range of choices, that individuals get to essentially audition their care providers, and that it is a well-supported and well-monitored model of support.
And how well does it work in the end?
I mean, home shares can last for decades. As a coordinator in British Columbia, I oversaw home shares where people had lived together for 20, 30, 35 years. And so when it's all about the relationship and the match, and when you get that right, home shares can be such a really beautiful model of support. And there's a lot of research that talks about quality of life indicators, and that really the more in community a person is, the better quality of life indicators they have. So truly people are living happier, more inclusive lives.
So Nova Scotia has been very slow at getting people moved out of institutions. Now we are in this province formulating a plan to do that. What would you like to see government officials put into that policy when it comes to home sharing?
Yeah, the fortunate part really about being one of the last provinces to do this work is that we get to learn from the mistakes and the successes that other jurisdictions, provinces, states have seen. And, some of that is really around making sure that we have the supports for the organizations that'll be coordinating this in place, that we have the oversight and the monitoring to ensure that people are able to live good, safe, inclusive lives in community, and really that we fund and support this program appropriately long-term down the road.
Well, how well does home sharing work for clients who are lower functioning and people who would require a lot of assistance?
Home share is such a unique model that it doesn't really matter how much support a person needs. It's about the match and the relationship. And so I've absolutely seen scenarios where people with complex support needs, whether that's complex physical, medical support needs, or perhaps, mental health support needs, can absolutely, in the right home share, live happily for decades in that same arrangement. So, home share is a model because it is so unique and because it is so flexible. It can be, catered to whatever that person's support needs are.
So let's say a homeowner decided to rent out their suite or their basement. Is it possible that a client could be living in there and 24/7 care could be on the premises as well?
The really important thing to know about home share is that it is not a model of support where the home share provider or the family is responsible for that person 24/7. One of the most important safeguards for any person is that they are involved in their community and they have natural supports. So even in a home share situation, the person supported should still be seeing family, should be hanging out with their friends, going to church if that's what they choose, going to the rec center, having a job, volunteering, going to a day program. We know from circumstances in other provinces that really people are safest when they have natural supports around them and when there's not just one person with that kind of eyes-on support.
Is that support available in Nova Scotia, or is there a shortage of that kind of support staff in this province, especially if you're looking at a model where people are going to be more spread out than they were before?
Yeah, there is a model similar to home share that currently exists here in Nova Scotia. It is similar to what's going to be the home share model rolled out by the province in the coming weeks. There will be some key differences. One of those key differences is that currently the model that exists here in Nova Scotia is directly under the department. So the department directly oversees the Alternative Family Supports program, whereas home shares will be coordinated through organizations. And while it doesn't sound like a big difference, we've seen jurisdictionally from other places that it actually has some pretty key outcomes when organizations that are embedded in community are the ones coordinating and monitoring home shares.
And you argue that homeowners who sign up for this must make a profit. Why do you believe that? What is reasonable, I guess, for a homeowner to earn from this?
Yeah, it's really, really important to know that this is a professional support model. This is not relying on people out of the goodness of their heart to support somebody in their home. Home share providers are expected to have certain training, keep up professional development, meet certain standards, have paperwork and reporting requirements. They're expected to act and behave as professionals, and so they are therefore should be paid professionally. And that's a really key model of this. A model of support is that professionals being paid professionally to do the professional work they're doing. And so, home share providers receive a tax-free income.
And just quickly before I let you go on this, the call is for 500 homes by 2028. Is that doable?
The remedy writers, the men who wrote the Human Rights Remedy Report, are experts. And so if they have put it in there that it is doable by 2028, then I absolutely believe it is doable by 2028. That being said, there's a lot of work to do in this province. And part of that is really just getting the word out there that there is another way. If you're a professional working in a different setting and maybe you're feeling burnt out at your work, or, unfortunately, there's a cost of living crisis here in Nova Scotia. So if you're needing another source of income, and really you're wanting to truly help people live good lives in community, and you're passionate about real, inclusive, strong communities, then home sharing is the model of support for you. And I see that as the way that we can really grow this model and meet that target of 500 home shares by 2028.
Laura Church, really appreciate your time on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, raising the stakes in a cross-border trade war. The Prime Minister responds to Donald Trump's new tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum.
And Gaza ceasefire in jeopardy. Hamas delays the upcoming hostage release as President Trump's rhetoric threatens to reignite the conflict. Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, during his meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance in Paris, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warned that tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would hurt both countries.
Trudeau also warned that the tariffs would hurt a U.S. state that Vance cares deeply about. The CBC's Ashley Burke has more.
At a summit in Paris, the Prime Minister pushing back against Donald Trump's latest threat.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified. We are the U.S.'s closest ally. Our economies are integrated.
A message he took directly to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. The event's cameras only briefly caught their exchange in this crowd of world leaders away from the media. Trudeau's photographer close enough to take photos. A Canadian official says the Prime Minister mentioned to Vance the impact of tariffs in his home state, Ohio. Trudeau's publicly warned that a trade war will only drive up American costs. In the U.S., Ohio is the biggest exporter of goods to Canada, and it's where Trump's promising to revive American steelmaking jobs.
We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs. And if it comes to that, our response, of course, will be firm and clear.
But Trudeau isn't revealing details.
Can you reciprocate dollar for dollar with tariffs on aluminum and steel?
As usual, we hope that it will not come to that.
Vance also isn't saying if Canada could get an exemption.
Why are you slapping tariffs on steel and aluminum? Why are you slapping tariffs?
The Trump administration believes that
this AI summit, his first international trip to represent Trump's next era of America First on the world stage.
The United States of America is the leader in AI, and our administration plans to keep it that way.
Trudeau says he's speaking to other countries to coordinate a response. The Prime Minister will leave Paris to head to Brussels on Wednesday to sit down with European Union leaders who are also bracing for tariffs to hit them too. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Paris.
Canadian premiers are in Washington this week on a joint mission to convince Donald Trump to drop all tariff threats against this country. They're meeting with U.S. lawmakers a day after Trump's announced new 25% levies on all steel and aluminum imports. Katie Simpson reports from Washington.
Canada's premiers are in Washington, D.C., trying to do as much networking as they can, trying to get FaceTime with influential Republicans and influential business leaders as they really push the anti-tariff agenda. It is a steep hill to climb, considering Donald Trump seems pretty set on moving ahead with tariffs, not just against Canada and Mexico, but really against all global trading partners. Ontario's Doug Ford speaking to a largely Canadian audience in Washington, D.C., though there were some American business officials that were in the audience. But he's really preaching a message of trying to deepen the Canada-U.S. relationship while admitting it's kind of difficult to get that message through to the White House.
President Trump is probably one of the best negotiators in the world. This is his area of expertise. So we're going to continue communicating our message about the AMCAN fortress and just working the room, working Washington.
Donald Trump campaigned on imposing tariffs on America's trading partners. He described himself as the tariff man and multiple times said tariff is the most beautiful word. So his behavior and his hardening of his language, it's not necessarily surprising. And some experts who deal with cross-border trade and work with companies who are trying to grow their businesses through the North American supply chain, they are deeply concerned that no matter what, these tariffs are coming.
You start seeing stock markets go down, when you start seeing vehicle plants close, when you start seeing the price of beef go up, when you start seeing the price of energy go up, that is what will get through to President Trump. When his allies on Capitol Hill call and say, why are we doing this? Why is Canada taking a hit like this?
Canadian premiers are all delivering a very similar message, essentially that tariffs on Canada are going to hurt the North American supply chain, that it's going to hurt the Canadian economy, but it's also going to deeply hurt the American economy. The big question is whether this push is really going to do anything to change the president's mind. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
After meeting U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House, Jordan's King Abdullah released a statement calling for a two-state solution in the Middle East, while pushing back against Trump's plan for the U.S. to take over and redevelop Gaza. Sasha Petrovic has the details.
It's not a complex thing to do. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time.
U.S. President Donald Trump repeated the proposal that he has put forward to have the U.S. take over Gaza, not to buy it, not to conquer it, but just to simply take it over and to develop it with hotels and office towers and houses. And what would happen to the Palestinians who live there? Well, they would be moved to, as he put it, parcels of land in Jordan and Egypt and anywhere else where somebody wants to set up a home for them, and they would not be allowed to return. He said much of this while he was sitting next to King Abdullah, the leader of Jordan, who is in a bit of an uncomfortable position because Jordan does not want to take in millions of Palestinians. They made that clear. Egypt has said that too, and so have other Arab countries. But Trump is putting the pressure on because both of these countries, Jordan and Egypt especially, rely on U.S. help to the tune of more than $1.5 billion a year. Trump is saying, though, that this is going to happen, and in his words, will create peace in the Middle East.
All the stories you hear about the Middle East not really wanting peace, that they want war, they want this, they want to go a certain place. Let me tell you, those stories are false. They want to have peace.
Jordan's king didn't really have much of an answer to all of this. He suggested that Arab countries, and Egypt in particular, will come back with some kind of a proposal. And as far as Jordan's concerned, he said that it has to take care of its own interests.
Mr. President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
So a lot of questions being asked, and much of it originating from the White House. Sasha Petrovic, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The Trump administration's U.S. tariffs on all aluminum and steel imports include the European Union. As Crystal Gamansing reports, the EU calls them unjustified and is vowing to respond.
The European Union and the United States have the largest bilateral trade and investment relationship, making the transatlantic partnership a critical one. Now, European Union President Ursula von der Leyen is in Paris attending that artificial intelligence summit. There, she was able to have a sideline meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. But in front of the cameras, neither one mentioned anything about the tariffs on steel or aluminum. Earlier, von der Leyen did put out a statement in which she said that she was deeply disappointed with the tariffs, called them unjustified, and said that the 27 bloc of nations would be responding. Now, when this tariff news broke on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump said they would go towards, quote, making America rich again. Well, the EU's trade commissioner called it a lose-lose scenario.
We will act to safeguard our economic interests. We will protect our workers, businesses and consumers. This is the way to protect European interests, but it is not our preferred scenario.
In terms of context, steel exports to the U.S. average about €3 billion a year over the past decade. So this is an important relationship, and there will be some sort of response from the EU. EU nations and leaders are calling for a unified response. As for here in the UK, we haven't heard much from any government official, although Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, said that she does believe there is still time to negotiate a deal. As for UK Steel's Director General, Gareth Stace has said that this would be a devastating blow to the steel industry here in the UK, and he is calling on the UK government to ensure domestic production in the domestic market against what he calls a rising tide of global protectionism. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
And Donald Trump's latest tariff threats are weighing heavily on the minds of many aluminum and steel producers here at home. As the CBC's Nisha Patel shows us, both industries are already feeling the impact.
Hamilton, Ontario is known as Steel Town. For workers here, tariffs are a real concern.
It's going to hurt the steel industry.
It'll be bad for everybody.
So, you have to take it as it comes.
Just the threat of a 25% tax has already been weighing on steel producers for weeks, not to mention the industry's tens of thousands of employees.
Sales are slow. The order books are low. They've actually put a hiring on freeze on hiring.
Now tariffs could take effect in less than a month. Without an exemption for Canada, businesses could be devastated.
Many key sectors of the economy that rely on steel. It has an infrastructure and a defense application. So you really want your domestic industry protected.
It's a familiar fight. When Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs on steel in 2018, Canadian exports sank almost immediately. The trade war ended a year later after huge disruptions to businesses on both sides of the border.
We've got a big problem in Canada. We've got to find another way to fuel our economic growth rather than relying on exports to this very, very unreliable trade partner.
In the Ontario border town of Windsor, across the river from Detroit, Ryan Jordan's company transforms steel into parts like railings. He weathered the tariff storm back in 2018.
It was difficult for us. We had to diversify. We're not sure how this is going to play out at this time.
What frightens him most, he says, is the possibility of even higher tariffs.
In a month, now it's 40%, and then a month later it's 50%. I don't know how anyone can survive even quoting a project for the future.
It seems anyone in business these days needs to have nerves of steel. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Travel agencies across the country are reporting hundreds of Canadians are canceling trips south of the border in response to those U.S. tariffs. And as Michelle Gussoub reports, the U.S. tourism sector is warning that could threaten tens of thousands of American jobs.
When I travel, I'll be telling people I'm from Canada.
A surge in Canadian pride brought on by a potential looming trade war with the U.S.
I don't like his politics, the way that he's treating Canadian people or Canada.
It's not just a war of words. This travel agent says Canadians are canceling trips to the U.S. in droves.
But this time definitely feels different. This has been a much more tangible reaction from clients who are actually outright canceling trips.
The potential dollar impact of those cancellations is big. According to the U.S. Travel Association, a 10% dip in inbound travel from Canada could translate to $2.1 billion in lost spending and jeopardize 140,000 American jobs.
In most destinations in the U.S., Canada is the #1 international market. So looking at places like Las Vegas, Palm Springs, Orlando, Phoenix, a lot of those Sunbelt destinations are going to be hit really hard.
Those in the travel industry say the weak Canadian dollar was already impacting U.S. travel. The economic threats have many Canadians saying anywhere but the U.S.
Canadians are taking a stand in solidarity. They're showing Americans, or rather the U.S. administration, where they're going to spend their tourism dollars.
So far, it's hard to put a figure on how many trips have been canceled. Data from Statistics Canada and the U.S. Bureau of Transportation don't yet reflect the last 2 weeks. But the message in the travel industry is clear.
When I've been speaking to some of our customers, what I'm hearing a lot is trust. The trust has been broken. I think that's just the same word that I keep hearing over and over again. And they're just not feeling safe to travel there right now.
Canadians staying close to home in the face of so much uncertainty. Michelle Gussoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Google says it has changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America for U.S. users accessing Google Maps. The company made the change after Donald Trump signed a proclamation on Sunday. It was one of the executive orders by the American president after taking office. The site has been referred to as the Gulf of Mexico for 4 centuries. In Mexico, users will still see the original name, and for the rest of the world, Google Maps will show both names.
Canada's main stock index moved lower today as losses in base metals weighed against gains in energy, while U.S. stock markets were mixed. Here's a look at how the markets did do as we head to break. All right, everyone get ready for it. Winter's going to roar through again. It's been snowy and sunny and cold, but more mess on the way.
Now the ice scrapers need to get a workout.
Yeah, for sure. It is certainly going to be messy. That's the headline for Thursday. But quiet for Wednesday. We'll take that. We'll take the sunshine. Have a look at this picture. We'll start with our viewer picture of the day and zoom in on Hackett's Cove. And it's just north of Peggy's Cove. And a beautiful shot here.
Oh, isn't that nice? Very nice.
Eugene Rideout. I love the sky in this picture. Very nice indeed. Thanks to Eugene for sharing Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. So yes, Wednesday is quiet indeed. -2, -3, -4 in the southwest. Everybody else -5 to -8, and the wind's relatively light from the north. Want to revisit this graphic?
I like this, Ryan. Yeah.
This is a popular graphic for good reason. And again, freezing rain. That's where we're looking at that glazing, that coating of ice that can be so problematic for the power lines, and that's where you're really going to need the ice scraper, right? Ice pellets, on the other hand, accumulates like snow, like the delicious sprinkles on the donuts of my kid's favorite donut.
We need to pick up some donuts.
I think so. I think so. And so when I say on this graphic, mainly an icy mix across Nova Scotia. That is what I mean by icy mix, is a combination of ice pellets and freezing rain. And really a pretty good agreement on the track of this system and where we're going to see these boundaries of the snow and the ice pellets for northern New Brunswick, but still quite a bit of disagreement on just how much of the ice pellets versus freezing rain we'll see. We'll get that Thursday morning commute in. The afternoon commute, not so much. A real mess of snow, ice pellets, changing to rain through the evening as those winds will gust from the southeast.
The best of both donuts, I guess. In some competitions, being a top dog or underdog isn't always the point.
Everybody loves a dog, and they don't care who we are, what we have. They just love us, and we love them. That's why I'm here today.
Too cute. It is the final day at the 149th Westminster Dog Show in New York. This year attracted more than 2,500 contenders, spanning 200 breeds of dogs. And the prestigious dog show took off in the 1870s in Manhattan.
It's the second oldest sporting event in the United States, only topped by the Kentucky Derby horse race. And if anyone ever combined those two, that would be some dog and pony show.
Sure would be. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.